and welcome to this edition of Avatar Face to Face. I'm your host, KInch-Thomas, and we want to thank you so much for joining us today. We here at Avatar love to share information about all of the wonderful arts and cultural events going on, not only events, but artists and all the work that they do going on in Westchester and beyond. So today we want to welcome to the show an author, an educator, a photographer, a journalist. This is Linda Tarrant Reid. Linda, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you, Jewel.
You're
I'm
so
so happy to be here.
Absolutely. And I want to say a little bit more about you and your background because you have had quite the stellar career in writing and as an author and as an editor. You are a freelance journalist and have
Yes.
written extensively on African Americans for the New York Daily News. You were the managing editor of Million Man March, contributor and researcher for the Family of Black America, and co-editor of Black Star. Is that Black Star Power,
Power.
BET celebrating 20 years. And now the very acclaimed author of Discovering Black America. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Well, I'm pleased to be here. I
Okay.
love any opportunity to talk about discovering Black America.
Well, I can see why, because it is just one of the most powerful historical compilations that I have had the pleasure
Mm,
of putting my hands on in recent past. And I would say the same thing of most people who have had the opportunity to pick this up. I want to, before we start talking, deeply about the book, I want to ask you about a little bit about your history in terms of where your passion for literature and writing came from and when it started.
oh my goodness.
Hmm.
It started probably when I was very, very young. I mean, we always had a library card.
Okay.
On Saturdays, that was definitely a place that we spent time, my sister
Right.
and I and our
Okay.
friends in New Rochelle. Also, I attended a wonderful elementary school
Mm-hmm.
that really, really nurtured the literary side of,
Mm.
of a person.
Okay.
I mean, we had astounding book fairs
Okay.
before, the scholastic book fairs that they have, now that the children in the elementary schools have access to.
Right.
We had book fairs where the actual authors came.
Mm.
And I mean, really famous authors and children's book illustrators, and we were able to talk to them
Okay.
and to ask them questions about their craft.
Wow.
And this was in the elementary school.
Wow. Okay.
Um, the African American history was part of our family.
Mm.
I mean, our parents always had magazines, Jet magazine, Ebony
Right.
magazine.
Right.
And the first of the year, we always got the Black History calendar.
Mm-hmm.
And I, of course, would read every
Everything.
inch entry because,
Voracious reader.
well,
Yes.
I just thought it was really fascinating that there were all these incredible African Americans who had contributed
Mm.
to the American experience.
Right.
I didn't learn about them in school. I learned about them at home.
Okay.
So I think, and then I attended a historically black college, Hampton University,
Right.
which at the time I attended, it was Hampton Institute.
Ah. Okay.
And that was the school of Booker T. Washington,
Yes.
who was the first principal of Tuskegee
Right.
Institute. And
Okay.
Tuskegee Institute was and still is Hampton Institute, Hampton University's
Right.
sister school.
Okay.
So,
So
steeped in history.
a wonderful foundation then for what you were going to the journey that you were going to take
Right.
into the authoring and the writing and all the history that you have been a part of
Right.
and developing.
And the other thing, the other element that I have to add is that I'm an extremely curious person.
Mm.
Sometimes, nosy, to the point,
Okay.
where I really enjoy the investigation.
Okay.
So that really was honed at Hampton
Okay.
because I had this incredible professor who really taught us how to research. I
Mm.
was totally familiar with the library and how to get the materials that I needed. But
Right.
she really drilled down on that
Okay.
and really showed us how to do it in a very effective way.
Okay. So your path was really carved there for you with some mentors
Yes,
as well as the whole educational system, which is
yes.
something that does not always happen that organically, but it's wonderful that that's how, the journey that you took from a very young age.
Right, and it got even more organic
Mm,
because in my senior year, Doubleday and Company came
mm,
to campus
okay.
to recruit, um, employees,
Okay.
and I just happened upon the recruiter,
Uh-huh.
and I was not properly dressed. I had on jeans, and we were taught not to go to interviews without
Without
stockings and,
right,
you know,
right.
a skirt, suit, just looking very appropriate.
Yes, indeed.
And so the woman said, "Oh, don't worry, just sit down." And she interviewed me and hired me.
Mm,
And so before I graduated, I had a position in the editorial department
look at that.
of Doubleday and Company.
Well, your training had started from elementary school for it, so it wasn't a matter of just happened. You were taking the steps, even if you weren't aware at that point, being as young as you were, but it was seems as if it was laid out,
Really.
and then you moved right into that career
And
place.
it felt that seamless. I mean,
Okay.
literally, it felt that seamless. I ended up doing an editorial training program,
Okay.
which enabled me to go through the company and work in every phase of the publishing industry,
Mm, wow.
including, the children's books, mysteries, the trade books, which are the bestsellers,
Okay.
the academic paperbacks. Doubleday at that time had an advertising company. I
Uh-huh.
worked there for a little while.
Wow.
They
Okay.
also had a bookstore. Many people will remember this bookstore. It was a duplex bookstore on the corner of 53rd and 5th Avenue in New York City.
Okay.
And I worked there.
And you were there. All right.
So,
So it has been, it sounds like a very rewarding journey in the publishing and the writing
yes.
field. And you got to a point then where you said that you were inspired to write a book about African Americans and their history.
Well, yes, I truly was inspired because I had been working on a number of projects
Hmm.
about the African American experience. I
Okay.
was the managing editor, as you mentioned, on the Million Man March book
Right.
and the Family of Black America, and also worked very diligently on Black Entertainment Television's
Mm,
20th anniversary book.
right.
So I was getting a well rounded education in, African American history
Right.
and learning stuff that I really had not heard before.
Right.
So I figured that if I didn't know this information, and I had done a lot of research,
Hmm.
there were a lot of people who were unaware of some of the achievements and events and activities of African Americans. And I thought this would be a great book for young people.
Okay, so then that was part of your psyche going into writing the book was to bring out all
Yes,
of these unknown
yes.
facts and historical situations and people that, we typically don't know about.
Right. And more importantly, I wanted to weave a story.
Hmm.
I wanted to bring forth the narrative of
Right.
African American history
Okay.
from the time we landed
Right.
on this continent up to the present day
Mm.
when we have an African American president.
Right, and we have to say that it is discovering Black America from the age of exploration to the 21st century.
Yes.
So we're covering what, 500
Yeah,
years?
we say
About that?
400, but
Oh,
it's
400 years?
500.
Okay,
It's not 500, but it's 400 and some
and
change.
some change. Okay, well, that's some change and that's some history. And as you have compiled it in this book, I must say that it is enormously engaging.
Oh, thank you.
And I understand that the book was written with the young reader in mind. But as I mentioned to you before we even turned the cameras on, it's it's a fabulous book for an adult to read.
I'm getting that feedback,
Okay.
and I think the reason why adults are engaged is because it's accessible.
Yes.
I'm a journalist, so a lot of my training
Mm-hmm.
has been to compress really complicated information into a small space.
Right.
And so that really enables you to just take the information in the computer in my brain,
Right.
and separate the wheat from the chaff.
Okay.
So
Okay.
you're putting, or I was putting, the nuggets of the information, and then I was able to, wrap it around the actual history of
Right.
America,
Right.
but talk about the African American experience,
Right. And
in that history.
yes, and as you said, you're saying that, and it makes me get a little excited because as I was reading it, it it from the very beginning it captivates and it captures you because of the story that is there,
Yes, yes.
because you are reading about these individuals, you're reading about the
Real
families,
people.
real people, and you the sequences that you have taken. I just want to hear a little bit about how you determined to lay that out, and what your process was in terms of what you were selecting and
It's
why.
interesting because the first um, words that I put down, because it's really quite amazing when you really sit down to write the book,
Mm-hmm.
because you just like, what am I going to write first?
Right.
So of course I said the first Africans to set foot on these shores were the Africans who were brought to Jamestown, Virginia in 1619.
Right.
So I had to think about that,
Uh-huh.
and I discovered that was not true.
Aha.
So I said, well, I can't write that, or I can write it, but that has to come later.
Okay.
So, further research, there were Africans aboard Christopher Columbus's ships,
Yes.
the Nina, the Pinta, the Santa Maria.
Right.
And these were Portuguese gentlemen of African descent. You know, they were translators, they
Okay.
were boat pilots, they were
Mm.
not enslaved.
Right. Okay.
Um, then I discovered there was another, you know, explorer who had come, before, not before Columbus, after Columbus, but he had come to the mouth of the narrows
Okay.
of the Hudson River,
Right.
and he was of African descent
Okay.
also.
Okay.
So I kept discovering that there were explorers who accompanied the Spanish conquistadors.
Right.
One person in particular that fascinated me, and I just had to put him in the book, Estevanico. He's
Mm.
called Black Stephen, or Stephen the Moor. He
Okay.
was from Morocco, and he started out with a Spanish expedition, and they were shipwrecked, and they ended up exploring the southwest
Mm.
of
Wow.
America. And he was incredible. He was at first a captured, enslaved person,
Mm-hmm.
but once they were shipwrecked and they were held prisoner by the Native Americans,
Uh-huh.
he became very adept at communicating with the Native Americans. He
Okay.
learned all of these dialects.
Ah.
So at that point, he was a guide to these conquistadors,
Okay.
and he was no longer considered a
A
slave.
slave. Wow.
So it was interesting how
Yeah.
how his process of liberation occurred.
Mm.
And that was in the 1500s.
Wow. See, and that is what is so captivating about the information that you have in here, because I would think you know, ordinary individual. I know some of. I'm from West Indian descent, but I
Oh,
know some of African American histories, what you learn in school, and there are certain pockets that there are certain major events, there are certain iconic and major people and individuals. But when you read something like what you just relayed to us, it just gives you such an expansion
that's right.
of what
That's right.
the experience and the history
That's right.
is all about, that you can only say to yourself, wow, there's more.
That is true.
There's more that I should know.
And see, the interesting thing, and this is what I think is very important for all readers, I mean, no matter what their age, is that you have to consider the source. Who is writing your
Okay.
history?
Absolutely.
And for what reason?
Right.
What is the agenda here?
Okay.
So you leave some things out. You do not celebrate some people because that's not helpful
Okay.
to what you're trying
To
to
the
put out,
story.
right?
Yes.
To the story
Right.
that you're. But what's helpful for us as African Americans is to learn the complete story.
Yes.
That our story doesn't begin and end with slavery.
With slavery. Yes.
Which
Okay.
is, certainly it was a very difficult time. It was a horrendous time. But the bravery within that institution, we did not just, get on those ships
And it
take
just,
that voyage
right.
during the Middle Passage,
Right.
which took sometimes from 4 to 12 weeks.
Okay.
We didn't just do that, without thinking. I mean, some rebelled, some jumped off those ships,
Right.
some, tried to foment mutinies,
Right,
and
right.
killed the slave drivers.
Okay.
So there are lots of stories, and even during slavery, there were plenty of rebellions and revolts from the enslaved people who just were not going to take it anymore.
Okay. Now, I mean, you go through, as we said, from the age of exploration, which we're talking about before Christopher Columbus, before actual chattel, the whole Middle Passage. So you're starting from well beyond that, and you're going through certain sections of history and capturing the essence of what was significant and really important. I just want to mention a couple of those
Okay.
sections. So starting from the exploration of the New World and settlements in colonial America, then you go through slavery, the road to the Civil War, Reconstruction and Jim Crow, 2 world wars and the Black cultural awakening, the Civil Rights Movement to Black Power movement, African Americans advance, and then African Americans today. So it is an expansive journey that you take us on. And as I said, it's not something that just a young person would be interested in. It's something that myself and many adults would, relish in terms of the information that you provide. So I want to say, let me ask you, how long did it take you to get all of this in place?
It took 6 years.
Mm,
And it's 6 years of research. I mean,
right.
because really, I felt the need to go to some places,
Right.
to actually. So I went to Jamestown,
Okay.
which, it's really interesting because Hampton is in that, neighborhood. I
Okay.
mean, it's in Virginia,
Right.
and Jamestown is in Northern Virginia. But went there, went to the settlement, saw those ships that brought over, the colonists,
Right.
teeny ships. Those people must have been very small people.
Mm.
And it's amazing because you go by the diet, so there wasn't a lot of great nutrition. So people were small in stature.
Right.
They had a replica of a Native American home. So you were able to go into it's not a teepee, but the abode,
Okay.
and see, how they cooked and, where they slept. There's a fort there that the settlers had
Right.
built.
Okay.
And then when I went on the ship, one of the enactors, one of the interpreters, who was dressed in garb, colonial garb, he said to me, I told him I was writing a book on African American history, and he said, you must include the Anthony Johnson family.
Ah.
He was an African American, not an African American, an African who came from Angola, and he was an indentured servant. He became free, and he married, and he amassed 800 acres. He was a landowner.
Yes. Yes.
And
I
this was in
remember
the
that.
1600s.
Right. Right.
So, that was a gift.
Okay.
I would not have necessarily known about Anthony Johnson, not as vividly as this gentleman was explaining.
Okay.
So that just pushed me forward to,
Okay.
to really dig deeper into the Anthony Johnson story.
Wow.
And I did. There are court records that
That
document
right.
his
And
acquisitions.
okay. And talking about court records, I must say that the illustrations, the imagery, the archival documents, all of those that you include in this book just enrich the story so much more. I want to flip through and just show our viewers here some of what they have in store for them, because this is an amazing collection of all of those types of documents and images and illustrations. And it is really wonderful to see all of this. I want to say that each and every chapter, you have an iconic photo or image, like this one, for example.
Right.
We're talking here about the road to the Civil Wars,
Right. And
right?
this was interesting because in the South in particular, well, in the South, many of the dispossessed enslaved people followed the army, you know,
Mm,
and they became wagon drivers.
okay,
The women became laundresses, and cooks.
right.
So that is a group who participated in the Civil War
Okay.
on the Union side.
Wonderful. And this other example here, we have the first colored senators and representatives.
Right.
So just
And this was
another
during
example.
Reconstruction.
Okay.
And this was a very important point in our history
Hmm.
because after the Civil War, the South was in ruins, and the federal government set up a quasi government. And
Mm.
also at that point, African American men were given the right to vote.
Okay.
And that was how many of these representatives were elected to
Ah.
Congress, these African American representatives.
Okay.
So,
Wow. Wow. And as I said, there are so many powerful images to look at in the book, but you have archival documents and letters and
right.
court
And
documents.
that's really a timeline of the beginning of slavery.
Yes.
And see, what happened was you had a free community of blacks in several places, you
Mm.
know, on the coast.
Right.
And what happened when the British really took hold of, the colonies, they started institutionalizing slavery.
Okay.
And that was the birth of chattel slavery,
Right.
which essentially, enabled enslaved individuals to be bought, sold, and mortgaged. They were not considered, human beings,
Right. Right. Yeah.
but property.
Right. So as folks go through this, they will see so many of these types of illustrations and documents and paintings and the photos
Right.
of the people that you write about.
Right. That particular section is about the slave narratives. There were
Yes.
many, many individuals who wrote about their experiences
Mm,
as enslaved people.
right.
This gentleman, Equiano, um, Olu, the pronunciation is a little Oluda Equiano.
Right.
He wrote about the Middle Passage
Mm-hmm.
and his experience being kidnapped and, brought over to uh, the colonies
Right.
and being enslaved.
And he was one of the young people that you have included in the book.
Right.
Okay.
And that was purposeful because I wanted the young people. The book is geared to middle school readers,
Okay.
although everybody's been reading it and
Yes.
appreciating it, which is great.
Right.
But I did want the middle school reader to see that there were people their age that, had certain
Mm-hmm.
experiences and that they could put themselves in the places of these historic individuals
Right.
and really try to get an understanding of what it was like for these young people.
Amazing. Amazing. What was the most challenging part for you about the whole process of pulling this treasure together?
I think selecting what to include,
Mm-hmm.
because when you have the audacity to to entitle your book "Discovering Black America,"
Right.
you're going to have people out there saying, "Oh, but you didn't put this in,"
Include this or
right?
that.
And
Yeah.
you can't really include everything.
Mm-hmm.
But I wanted to include enough information that people would just kind of be inspired
Yes.
to actually research further on their own,
Okay.
especially the young people. And there are plenty of resources in the back. We used a lot of websites,
Okay.
really reputable websites. I mean, a lot of my research came from state historical societies,
Okay.
which, really house and archive, primary source material,
Right. Right.
letters and posters, flags, all kinds
Mm.
of really great information.
Okay.
The Library of Congress, the National Archives, um, all university collections.
Right.
A lot of these universities have been willed collections from, prominent people
Mm-hmm.
that document a particular period in time.
Right.
So it's interesting for people to understand that all of this information is available.
Okay. Fantastic. This is an amazing accomplishment.
Thank you.
And I want to commend you on having the fortitude and the vision and just the diligence and the perseverance to do the 6 years of research, to put this together, and to present us with the gift
Mm.
of discovering Black America, because that is exactly what it is. It's a gift for all of us to be able to get a better understanding and to get something of the experience of Black American history. And so it is a wonderful gift to present to everyone and all that you know. And we want to thank Linda Tarrant Reid for being with us today and for sharing this book and her work with us. And we want to thank you for being a part of this program. Is there, where can they get the book very quickly?
Oh, the book is available online at
Hmm.
Amazon, at Barnes and Noble, at
Okay.
any bookstore, and any online book vendor.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Discovering Black America. It's a book you should have in your collection. Thank you so much for being with us today.